Good afternoon, class. Is the screen visible to you all? Yes, class, am I audible? Am I audible, class? Shall we begin with the lecture? Am I audible, class?
Yes, ma'am. You're audible, ma'am.
Okay, I'm sharing the screen. Kindly let me know if you're able to see it. It's visible, right?
Ma'am,
Okay.
it's visible, ma'am.
So, in the last class, we were discussing about powers and functions of Security Council, and we discussed about its primary functions that are maintenance of international peace and security, and special agreements, military staff organizations, and joint actions that are to be taken in the in lieu to control if there is any if there is any threat to the peace and security or maybe threat of war, right? So we discussed how Security Council has actually aided and helped, firstly by maintaining peace and security by peaceful means and also by taking enforcement actions and measures. And thereafter we discussed about special agreements, how are they done, maybe when they are not in, if they're not conducted, if they are unable to conduct agreements, then there is military staff committee that is to help and organize a committee that have military experts who can help it at the time of if there is to be a corrective action that is to be taking place. And in joint action we discussed that if there are no agreements available or maybe there is no forceful measure that could be applied, then there is a joint action that is to be taken place. Okay, right? So this again joint action is of the greater powers and the permanent members of the Security Council. They eventually create these they activate this joint action through 106 article, and there is no conclusion of any special agreement, as well as no there is suspension of this military staff committee, then there is joint action that is to be conducted, right? So thereafter we are to discuss rest of the powers that are the miscellaneous functions. So the first miscellaneous functions is what we already have discussed about. It's the role of Security Council in admission, suspension, and expulsion of members, right? So the council, can conduct and also recommend the assembly for, admission of a state into the UN as a new member, and the assembly may admit that member, and the council gives a favorable recommendation then only. Right? Similarly, the council is also empowered to recommend to suspend a particular member. This is we have already read in Article 4, 5, and 6. That is about admission, suspension, and expulsion of you under UN Charter. Okay. So again, under Article 5, the Security Council can recommend to suspend, right? And similarly, thereafter, Article 6, it can expel the members from the UN. And we have already read about the restoration of rights and privileges of the member state who are suspended. And also, what is the status for when the member state is expelled. Also, another important, aspect of Security Council is about the trust territories. So the trust territories are those territories who are interested upon, which we'll be discussing in the Trusteeship Council. So these are those territories who are unable to actually govern themselves, or maybe they need some uh, outside agencies for their sovereign, for their sovereignties and for their better, governance. So that's why they are called the trust territories. So Security Council is also empowered to control and supervise these areas of trust territories so that they are not again colonized. So basically what happened was all these colonized countries who did not attain independence, or who could not actually govern themselves, or did not have to proper resources to have a fixed government or a stable government. So for that reasons, there was intervention of Security Council who created trust territories, and trust was resided under again primarily to the superpowers, or again the permanent members of the Security Council, to aid and help those trust territories so that they can help attain a stable government, and for that reason they were able to govern themselves. So this was idea of the Security Council, to help them control. Okay. And another important aspect is that trusteeship agreements in this regard are also approved by Security Council. So the terms and agreements may also be altered and amended by it. Okay, the Security Council also, does for appointments of the Secretary General as well as other functionalities or the important members of the Secretary General and the councils are approved by the Security Council. And also, while there is some amendment in the Charter as per Article 108, the approval of 5 permanent members, again, when they have adopted by a vote of two-thirds majority, after the General Assembly has approved, including all the permanent members of the Security Council, then only there could be any amendment in the charter. Similarly, in the Article 109 provides for any conference of the General Event Assembly purpose of reviewing the charter. So again, it is decided by the two-third members of the General Assembly and by one of the by a vote of any 7 members of the Security Council, that they are going to review for any alterations or suggestions in regards to changes that are alterations that are to be done under the Security Council, right? So the fundamentals cannot be formulated, but if they are to be changed, that has to be considered by the Security Council, and for again that reason, the permanent members are important. Yes, next aspect is about collective security. So, what is collective security? Firstly, what is collective security means is the measures that are taken up by United Nations for putting up some sort of pressure, some sort of moral burden on in order to uh, you know in situations where there are threats or where there is threat to the peace or where there is threat of war, maybe breach of peace is there, or maybe there are some acts of aggression, right? So the term peacekeeping is actually is not under written in the UN Charter. It has evolved over the time period. Okay, so collective security and peacekeeping operations are one and the similar things. Who owns this collective security are the members of the United Nations. So the justification for above the collective securities are in order to, in plain language, again, to take effective collective security measures for prevention of any sort of threat or removal of threat from threats of peace, for the suppression as well as acts of aggression. So to take again to take and to supply is again the United Nations and its members independently responsible for that. So a system of collective security is actually formalized legally through a proper treaty, right? So the treaty, this expression collective security has actually not been used in the charter. Okay, so it has made provisions for joint measures under the authority of Security Council. So the enforcement action provided under Chapter 7 that we read of the Charter is referred to as collective security in particular. So if there is a threat to the peace or breach of peace or any act of aggression, it may take action. The Security Council may take action against I'm sorry, may take action as provided again through Articles 41 and 42 against the particular states who have conducted such acts. So the action is taken by the members of the United Nations collectively, and that is in order to maintain international peace and security. So, in order to ensure this prompt and effective action against the states who has conducted such acts, the charter also, makes the member states powerful to conclude such agreements that are again the special agreements under the consideration of Security Council to formulate special agreements and then abide by them at the disposal of Security Council. Right? So collective security is actually used by through the actions of veto power, through special agreements, and lastly through peacekeeping machine of the UN. That is again the Security Council. So the agenda of peace and peacekeeping has been the most central things for the whole United Nations organization, but specifically for the Council, it has invited and obliged, and various Secretary Generals have analyzed and recommended ways to strengthen and make United Nations as well as the Security Council per se, in order to keep peacekeeping machines peacekeeping on as the providing of as the machine and operation through the Security Council. It has strengthened its ways and has become more efficient, right? So, with regard to the peacekeeping operations, right, the Secretary General in his report actually has informed and given in detail about the kind and number of personnel they were prepared to offer to the United Nations, and there are need of new operations that are to be followed. So the General Assembly is supposed to be speeding up with the finances as well as of conducting of new operations. Is it clear? Any questions so far?
No, ma'am, no questions.
Okay. So today we are to discuss about, this is all about Security Council. So, now I want to discuss a few, cases that were resolved by Security Council in particular. So, the first thing I want to tell you is about the collective action that was taken up in the Gulf. So, the Gulf area is again the UAE, the Persian Gulf, and the areas of UAE, Dubai, Kuwait, Iran, Iraq, all this is considered to be Gulf. So the collective action in this area was conducted in and around 1990. Okay, so this is about the first cases in regards to Iraq and Kuwait. So we have already talked about this in while we were discussing annexation as well as state territories. We spoke about occupation and annexation. So what happened in this case was, write the name of the case. So firstly, what happened was in Iraq and Kuwait, these are two neighboring states and were also the member of UNO, right? So Iraq was an original member, so he joined while it was UNO had just begun, and Kuwait got its membership in 1963 after it actually got its independence in 1961. So in August, around 2nd of August in 1990, Iraqi tanks and troops actually invaded and occupied Kuwait because it was recently again the independence was not the Iraq wanted to subjugate its own sovereignty over Kuwait. Okay, so Kuwait was annexed to forceful measures, right, that we discussed in the state territories before in the unit of state territories, and and occupy the king, who is the emir of Kuwait, had fled to Saudi Arabia, the next country, right? And after a week, after this forceful annexation and occupation of Kuwait, and after that, Kuwait was converted and made into three respective districts of Iraq. Okay, so while the first contention that was raised was about this forceful annexation and forceful invasion, occupation, and annexation. So, that is again unlawful and unjustified in the year of 1990. So, as we know, the UN Charter is against, that all the member nations should not use force in order to attain territorial integrity or political independence from any of the states. So there are also various declarations that are there to promote friendly relations and cooperation amongst the nation states that prohibit such acts of forceful annexation as well as occupation and invasion, right? So what happened in this was that the territory of the state shall not be actually objected to the military occupation. So the territory of the state shall not be the object of acquisition by another state resulting from threat or use of force. So in this General Assembly passed this resolution, and citing this resolution, the Security Council again provided for this very fact that uh, in an emergency meeting, in the response to this request by the Kuwait, the Security Council promptly advocated and adopted a resolution where it condemned this invasion and demanded unconditional withdrawal of all Iraqi forces from Kuwait. Similarly, a similar request was already done before by USA. Okay, so later in about a week, the council adopted another resolution by which it decided that annexation of Kuwait by Iraq is by under any form and whatever pretext, which has no legal validity, is considered to be null and void. So through resolution of 662, I'll just write it down for you. Security Council Resolution 662, that is of 1990. Okay. So it was adopted by 14 votes in favor, and the resolution again demanded that Iraq should withdraw immediately and unconditionally and all its forces to position the same as they were before the 1st of August, when they invaded. Okay, this was first case. These are the Gulf crisis. I'll be mentioning about them. So another example I would like to tell you is about of military operations. So how does, we talked about military staff committee and how these are conducted, right? So This is about military operation in Rwanda. Operations in in Rwanda. So there were basically two tribes in Rwanda. One was Tutsis and one was Hutus. Okay, so these were the two tribes. While Tutsis had their dominations over Hutas, but Hutas were in a larger number. So the president of Rwanda, who was from the Hutus tribe, was traveling in an aircraft, and that aircraft was brought down, and he was killed mysteriously under some circumstances by through an air missile that was launched by the Patriotic Front, who was an insurgent group of the other tribe, that was the Tutsis. So this led to the killing of one tribe by another. So this civil tribe was there in October 1990.
Ma'am, can you repeat?
Okay, I'll repeat. So this is about how military operations are conducted, that we spoke about how the military staff committee operates. So this is the case about Rwanda. Rwanda is having two tribes who are inhabitants there. So Tutsis as well as Hutus. So the president of the Rwanda, who was from the Hutus tribe, was killed by under mysterious circumstances. His plane, his aircraft was brought down, and he was, there was an air missile that was launched by a patriotic front group, that was an insurgent group by the Tutsis. So this led to the killings, starting of killings of these. There was a crisis amongst the two tribes, and this clash worsened in 1990, and there was somewhat a civil war that has erupted, and there was actually a major fight, armed fight near the borders of Uganda, right? So what did Security Council do in this regard? So Security Council, after determining the magnitude of the humanitarian crisis that was happening in Rwanda in the under the purview of the civil strife or the civil war that had erupted between the two tribes, and there were mass killings that were happening. So this was called as humanitarian crisis, which were actually a threat to peace and security of the nation as well as member states. So it authorized the member states to cooperate with the Secretary General to conduct an operation until this was brought up to the necessary strength. So the security resolution was passed in 1994 in June. So the operation continued to contribute to the security and protection of such displaced people, refugees, and the civilians of that country. So the council had limited the operations for 2 months at an earlier date and expanded the previous operation, that was UNAMIR. That was the first operation that had started. So the Council called upon the Member States to report and respond urgently to the Secretary General and request for resources, including the logistics support, so that they can actually carry out uh, the mandate of securing peace and security back. So the French military, whose code name was Operation Trukudais, stepped into its operation in southwestern Rwanda. France sought support from European and African countries, but many countries were of the view that the European as well as African countries were of the view that this operation under the leadership of France will not be neutral. Therefore, they decided to remain aloof from this operation. So, through this, they could, set up a precedent, and this precedent were used further when there were forces in Egypt and there were forces in Italy after that. Right? So they were able to control this situation and ensure peace and security in the area of Rwanda. Is it clear? I'll write the name of the security resolution number. Security resolution Security Council resolution of 929, and the year is 1994. Is it clear?
Ma'am.
So now we begin with our projects of the day, right? So shall I call out the names? We'll start with the projects. The first, International Telecommunication Union, who will start with the basic composition of International Telecommunication Union and what does it do? What are the basic function of this? Yes, Safali, Sahil, any one of you can speak. Firstly, raise your hands who have actually prepared for class participation. At least I should know now. Nobody? So this means I'm just wasting my time and you don't want this to be done. Shall I presume that and presume this to be discussed already? Yes, class? Nobody from the group? Shivani, Shivain, Shobita, sorry, Sahil, Sai Sandesh, Chandana, Sai Ram Reddy, Samuluri, Sangeeta, Snehita, Sarthak, Savitri, Shelja, Shashank, Shashipriya, Shashwat, Chiniji, Shivam. Nobody? International Telecommunication Union. Nobody is interested in speaking up. Are you there in the class? At least raise the hands, any one of you. I'll give you 2 minutes. Hurry up, class. Just answer 2-3 questions. What is international telecommunication about? What was the origin? And what is the composition and what does it deal with? Nobody. So, for your information, International Telecommunication Union has its origin in when there was International Telegraph Union was established, and there was a convention that was signed in Paris. It is that is the very first type of communication that had started up. That is a telegraph, and in 1865 this had happened. So this International Telecommunication Convention of 1932 which actually merged with the International Telegraph Convention and also with the International Radio Telegraph Convention. Conclusively or collectively, integrated itself, and that's why in this International Telecommunication Union had started, and now it it was succeeded by the International Telegraph Union, and now again it was reorganized in 1947 and has an agreement with the United Nations, whereby it has been recognized as an important and specialized agency of telecommunications. So the main purpose as well as aim is again yet to promote peace and security and cooperation internationally through usage of telegraph, usage of telephone, radio services, foster technical development, as well as extended usage of such services to the public. Also, the main organs of this telecommunication union are the General Secretariat, the International Radio Consultative Committee, the International Frequency Registration Board, and the International Telegraph and the Telephone Consultative Committee. So the two consultative committees study technical and operation issues and deals with specific fields. And 1899, the Telecommunication Development Bureau was set up to strengthen technical assistance to the developing countries. This was all about International Telecommunication Union. Now moving on to Group 6, WTO. Yes, anybody from this group wants to talk about WTO? What do you understand by what WTO and how it does it function? Yes, Parneet Kumar. Premna, Premant, Prithvi, Rabia, Raghunandan, Rahul, Rajamala, Rajdeep, Ranjan, Rishabh Paul, Rishi, Ritudeep, Ritu, Priya, Roshni, Ruchita, Rukia, Rutvik. Nobody in the class? Nobody at all? चलो कोई बात नहीं anyway. So if you don't want to discuss, I will stop this discussion here, and you can do this topic of WTO on your own, right? And from tomorrow also, I'll call out the names. If you're interested, you can talk. Otherwise, you can tell me that I need not to do such an activity and waste another class, right? Anyway, let's begin with the next topic of our syllabus, that is about ECOSOC. We'll be talking about ECOSOC today, and I'll be introducing you about Economic and Social Council. Yet again, it is an important and a principal organ of UNO. Okay, so ECOSOC again is considered to be an important organ of UNO because it helps to uh, develop the developing countries, and also the developed countries can emancipy and actually encourage cooperation and proper development of all the nations at all levels. So through the flux of knowledge, through the flux of economics and maintenance of social circles, uh, things that are regional based, they're functional based. These all could be taken help of, right? So, since the two main organs that are the Security Council and the General Assembly, this is considered to be an important thing as well. So, the preamble of this ECOSOC actually determines that it determines that there must be promotion of society, and they should be provided with better standards of living, and they are for the larger freedoms. All right. So the primary purpose of United Nations, that is to achieve cooperation internationally and solve their international debates and conflicts and problems related to economics, social, cultural, or humanitarian character, and promote the respect for, encourage the human rights and fundamental freedoms without any discrimination against race, sex, language, rights, religion, etc. So, to achieve these ends, there was an establishment of Economics and Social Council, which is again one of the most important and principal organs of UNO. So tomorrow I just rest my class here, and tomorrow we'll talk about. I'll upload the PPT as well, and we'll speak about composition and voting system and what are the power and functions, and also we'll discuss about the specialized agencies and functional commissions as well as regional commissions. How does ECOSOC actually function, right? So I'll just take the attendance, give me a few minutes, or by the time if you have any queries you can ask. And also let me know if you want to conduct such an activity and group discussion in the next class or no. I'll be glad if you give me an honest answer, because there is no point wasting half an hour and not discussing. Then and again, it would be a lecture-based system. Then I can continue it with the lectures, and I'll go according to my pace. So class, any questions, further questions if you want to discuss something? So shall I presume that you don't want to discuss this further? You will continue with this group discussion on these projects. Shall I discontinue this? If you want to discontinue, kindly raise your hands. Or rather, the reverse. Those who want to conduct the group discussion, they can raise their hands. So we are all neutral. We don't want to discuss any. Let me take the attendance. There is some issue with the downloading of attendance. So I'm ending the class. If you have any queries, you can ask me. If you have any questions in mind, or I'll just close the class now.
No question.